If you watch this today, it's no accident. Picture the final moments of a massive glacier. For centuries, it has maintained perfect structural integrity, its crystalline architecture defying gravity through pure mass and momentum. Then, microscopic shifts in temperature trigger an irreversible cascade. Ancient ice begins to crack, releasing pressures that have been building for millennia. What appears to be destruction is actually liberation, the transformation of solid matter into flowing rivers that will reshape entire continents. Your consciousness has been undergoing a similar process, which is precisely why these words are reaching you now. There's a specific moment in human development when internal pressures reach critical mass, when the psychological structures that once provided stability begin to fracture under the weight of unexpressed potential. You're experiencing that moment today. The timing isn't coincidental. Your internal system has been broadcasting a frequency that makes this information not just relevant, but essential. The restlessness you've been feeling, the growing sense that something fundamental needs to shift. These aren't symptoms of dissatisfaction. They're indicators of evolutionary readiness. Consider the mathematics of personal transformation. Neuroscience research shows that the human brain resists change with the same intensity it uses to avoid physical threats. Most people will spend their entire lives reinforcing the same neural pathways, strengthening the same thought patterns, never accessing the frequency where authentic metamorphosis becomes possible. But you've reached a different threshold. You're standing at what chaos theorists call a bifurcation point, the moment when a system can no longer maintain its current state and must reorganize around a new attractor. The identity you've carefully constructed is approaching systemic failure, not because it's fundamentally flawed, but because you've outgrown its capacity. The signs have been accumulating for months, perhaps years. That persistent feeling of performing in your own life rather than living it. The increasing difficulty in finding genuine enthusiasm for pursuits that once energized you. The growing awareness that your current trajectory, no matter how successful it appears externally, is fundamentally misaligned with something deeper. What you're experiencing parallels what physicists observe in phase transitions. Water doesn't gradually become steam. It reaches a specific temperature and suddenly, dramatically shifts from one state to another. Your consciousness is approaching its own phase transition, where the old operating system becomes incompatible with the new data you're processing. The ancient alchemists understood this principle. They knew that transformation requires what they called the nigredo, the blackening phase where existing structures must be completely dissolved before reconstruction becomes possible. You're in your nigredo now, whether you recognize it or not. Your decision-making processes have been quietly revolutionizing themselves. Where you once relied on external validation, logical analysis, and social consensus, you're now operating from something more fundamental, a cellular level knowing that cuts through complexity with surgical precision. You simply recognize when something is aligned with your authentic trajectory and when it isn't. People around you have begun commenting on changes they can't quite articulate. A different quality in your presence. A new weight to your words. A subtle but unmistakable shift in how you navigate situations that once triggered anxiety or people-pleasing behaviors. Some are drawn to this transformation. Others find it destabilizing. Here's what developmental psychology rarely discusses. Genuine transformation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about excavating who you were before the world taught you to be someone else. Every compromise you made for acceptance, every authentic impulse you suppressed for security, every truth you swallowed to maintain harmony. These weren't adaptations. They were accumulating distortions. The exhaustion you've been battling isn't from overwork. It's the metabolic cost of maintaining a persona that requires constant energy to sustain. Like running sophisticated software on incompatible hardware, the strain eventually becomes unsustainable. Your system is demanding an upgrade. But here's where the process becomes intensely challenging. To access your authentic self, you must first recognize the extent to which you've been operating from borrowed blueprints. The career path chosen to meet family expectations. The relationships maintained out of obligation rather than genuine connection. The goals pursued because they looked impressive rather than because they felt meaningful. This recognition creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable tension between who you've been and who you're becoming. Most people resolve this tension by reverting to familiar patterns, but you're different. You're willing to sit with the discomfort of not knowing while new clarity emerges. The cascade has already begun. Situations that once felt mandatory now feel optional. People who once held authority over your choices now seem to be playing roles in a script you no longer recognize. Ambitions that once drove you now feel like obligations imposed by a previous version of yourself. This isn't depression or crisis, it's clarity. You're finally seeing your life without the filters of conditioning, expectation, and fear. And what you're seeing is that most of what you thought was necessary was actually arbitrary. Most of what you thought was permanent was actually negotiable. Now, let me acknowledge what's typically mentioned at this point in such conversations. If these insights are creating recognition within you, and you sense this exploration deserves continuation, the most powerful way to nurture that is through your engagement. It's not about metrics alone, but about creating a signal that profound transformation is valued and supported. Because what's emerging isn't just personal evolution. It's a fundamental frequency shift that will reorganize every aspect of your existence. Your relationships will recalibrate around authenticity rather than convenience. Your work will align with contribution rather than just compensation. Your daily choices will reflect your deepest values rather than external expectations. The people who belong in your new reality will recognize this shift as a homecoming. They'll celebrate the risks you're taking because they understand that the greatest risk is remaining static. They'll support your expansion because they're also expanding. But others will experience your transformation as a threat to their own stability. Your growth will serve as an uncomfortable mirror, reflecting their own unlived possibilities. They may attempt to pull you back into familiar dynamics, not from malice, but from genuine fear of losing the version of you that fit comfortably into their world. Understanding this will help you navigate the resistance with compassion rather than resentment. The most disorienting aspect of this phase is the complete dissolution of your previous navigation system. The internal compass that once pointed towards security, approval, and predictable outcomes is being recalibrated toward authenticity, growth, and meaningful contribution. This recalibration period feels like sailing without instruments. One moment you're filled with crystalline clarity about your direction. The next, you're overwhelmed by uncertainty about everything you thought you knew. One day, the future feels limitlessly possible. The next, you're paralyzed by the magnitude of choices ahead. This emotional volatility isn't instability, it's integration. Your nervous system is processing years of suppressed truths simultaneously. Every authentic impulse you ignored is demanding acknowledgement. Every dream you postponed is asserting its relevance. Every aspect of yourself you've been keeping in storage is requesting activation. This is why sleep becomes erratic, why appetite fluctuates, why emotions feel more intense than usual. Your entire being is undergoing reconstruction at the cellular level. The old patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior are being systematically deactivated while new ones come online. The key is understanding that doubt isn't your enemy during this process. It's simply the voice of your old operating system trying to maintain relevance. Fear isn't intuition. It's the echo of programming designed for a reality you've already outgrown. Your authentic guidance speaks a completely different language. It doesn't argue or debate. It doesn't present elaborate justifications. It simply knows. And increasingly, you've been acting on this knowing, even when your rational mind objects. This quiet rebellion against your own limitations is what brought you to this moment. What's happening extends far beyond personal improvement. You're not just changing your circumstances, you're changing your fundamental frequency. You're graduating into a version of yourself that operates on entirely different principles about reality, possibility, and your own inherent worth. When this energetic shift completes, your external world will have no choice but to reorganize around your new signature. Opportunities that match your authentic trajectory will appear. People who resonate with your true frequency will gravitate toward you. Synchronicities will accelerate because you'll finally be moving in alignment with your natural flow. But the alchemy must be completed first. The lead of your conditional self must be fully dissolved so the gold of your essential nature has space to emerge. This isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. Creation is never tidy. Authentic transformation requires the courage to dissolve before you reconstruct. So here you are, at the completion of this message and the true beginning of your conscious evolution. If these words didn't feel like new information, but like deep remembering, then you already know what's next. Not because anyone will tell you, but because an internal directive has just been fully activated. The restlessness, the internal negotiations, the growing intolerance for anything inauthentic. It was all preparation for this moment. Your entire being was organizing itself around this activation point. The moment you stop seeking permission and start operating from your own authority. To mark this transition, this recognition of what's already in motion, write these words in the comments. The transformation is here. Let it serve not as communication to others, but as acknowledgement to yourself. A digital milestone marking the moment you aligned with the force orchestrating your metamorphosis. You don't need additional confirmation. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need an audience. You only need to trust the intelligence that guided you to this exact moment. The change isn't approaching. It's already active. The old version of yourself has been dissolving throughout this entire message. Space has been created. Your authentic life has been waiting. Today isn't about planning or preparing. Today is about recognition and activation. The star doesn't seek permission from darkness before it ignites. It simply burns,